looking at the top 5 reasons your newly installed certified Dexter washing machine will not start. This particular machine is a WCN, but most of this will apply to newer models as well. The most common reason that your machine won't start is incorrect voltage. This particular machine is 220 volt single phase. So you see at the power strip you have L1, L2, neutral, and ground. Now, if you check with the meter, L1 to neutral or ground should be 110 volts. L2 to neutral or ground should be 110 volts. And L1 to L2 should be 220. Now, it's very important that you have a separate neutral and ground. Right here, I have them jump together for testing purposes. It will run this way, but do not leave it that way for permanent installation. You run the risk of your circuit breakers not tripping and actually electrifying the body of the machine. Testing purposes only. If this was a 3-phase machine, you would have L1, L2, L3, and ground. L1 to ground would be 110 volts, L2 to ground would be 110 volts, and L3 to ground would be 110 volts. Unless you're running a phase generator, in that case, L3 to ground may be 220 volts by itself. Now, you need to have 3-phase power. You can't run separate legs from 3 individual circuit breakers. We do have separate videos covering how to tell if you have 3-phase power at your breaker panel. Once you've verified you have the correct power here, the next step would be to plug the machine in and make sure you're actually getting power to your motor. You can manually push the contactors down to engage the motor. So you have correct power coming in, sufficient power running to the motor, and you have the screen lit up. You've verified that you have the correct power. Now at this point, if your machine won't start, you've verified the power. The next most common thing would be to check for loose wires. Sometimes in shipping, these machines can get jostled around quite a bit and it can shake something loose. The most common places to check would be at your resettable circuit breaker. Make sure nothing came off here. Make sure none of the spades came off of the terminal strip there. Make sure nothing came off of your capacitors. Check the reversing timer. Check the Molex plugs on the back of the accumulator board. And check all of the wires on the door lock setup. Those are the most common places to have something come off. The next thing to check would be the door lock system itself. Again, we thoroughly test these machines, but sometimes in shipping it can get jostled and throw it out of alignment. So what you want to do is make sure right here where the door latch is, one, that the door switch is closing all the way when you latch the door. Like you can generally hear it click. Next, you want to make sure when the door lock solenoid pulls up that it's not overextending this mechanism here. Because if it goes too far on some of them, it will release the switch again and it will have locked the door, but it won't realize it locked the door. So you can manually put your fingers underneath the solenoid to raise it, and from the front of the machine raise it a few times and make sure that every time it's extended all the way that switch stays shut, and that when you release it, it releases properly. We do have a separate video on how to adjust this entire mechanism here if it is out of alignment. The next thing to check would be to see if your coin drop or accumulator board failed. If you verified power, verified the door lock's working okay, but it just won't start when you put coins in it. If it's not counting down, the first thing to check would be the coin drop itself. You can either check with a meter to see if that switch is working on the coin drop, or you can unplug the 2 wires, plug them into a different momentary switch and see if that works. Or you can literally unplug them and touch the 2 ends together momentarily to see if it counts down coins. If it still doesn't count down coins with any of that, it is most likely the accumulator board itself has failed. In either case, let us know what you found out and we would be happy to send you a replacement. The last thing to check, usually this doesn't happen, very unlikely. We test them thoroughly, but You never know when an electrical component is going to fail. The final thing to check would be your timer and reversing timer. They're generally pretty robust. They last a very long time. I've noticed that the reversing timers tend to fail before the regular timer. If you happen to have a laundromat with the same model machine right next to it, you can switch these components one at a time, like trade your reversing timer with a working machine and see if the problem follows the part. Like if you switch them and the machine that didn't work works and the one that used to work doesn't work anymore, that's your problem right there. If not, it's probably the main timer. If you don't have a machine to test the components on, let us know. We'll send you a reversing timer first and then a timer to try. But that should cover most of the installation problems.